The prospect of entering the later decades of life with a mind that remains as clear as a mountain stream is a vision that resonates deeply with anyone approaching their 60th year. Modern neuroscience has begun to map a future where cognitive decline is not an inevitable consequence of aging, but rather a variable that can be influenced by specific daily biological investments. A silent, often overlooked mechanism within the human brain works tirelessly every night to wash away the metabolic debris that accumulates during waking hours, a process that preserves memory and emotional stability. However, the prevailing cultural narrative often suggests that memory loss is simply a genetic lottery or a tragic destination that cannot be altered. This fatalistic view ignores the profound connection between systemic inflammation, stress hormones, and the brain's ability to repair itself. People frequently surrender to the idea of a senior moment without realizing that these lapses often signal a disruption in the brain's nightly maintenance routine rather than permanent damage. The body possesses an innate intelligence for regeneration that remains active well into the 9th and 10th decades of life if it is properly supported. By integrating the principles of mindfulness with the biological necessity of deep rest, a specific evening ritual emerges as a powerful guardian of cognitive health. This approach does not rely on pharmaceutical interventions, but on a harmonization of chemistry and consciousness. Through a structured path involving a specific herbal infusion and a shift in mental posture, the aging brain can be encouraged to perform its critical cleaning functions. The journey ahead explores how a simple cup of tea, when approached with the intentionality of John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness, becomes a catalyst for profound neurological preservation. The hidden architecture of brain clearance. The human brain operates as a metabolically expensive organ that consumes a vast amount of energy and, in doing so, generates a significant quantity of biological waste products. For decades, scientists puzzled over how this dense, enclosed structure managed to cleanse itself without a lymphatic system similar to that of the rest of the body. The discovery of the glymphatic system revealed a stunningly elegant solution where cerebrospinal fluid pumps through the brain tissue during deep sleep to flush out toxic proteins like beta-amyloid. This nightly brainwashing is the primary mechanism that safeguards memory and prevents the structural clutter associated with neurodegenerative diseases. John Kabat-Zinn's perspective on the wisdom of the body suggests that this healing potential is always present, but often obstructed by the relentless doing mode of the modern mind. The glymphatic system requires a specific physiological state to function, one that is characterized by the total relaxation of the vessel and the dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system. When an individual remains in a state of high alert or chronic low-level stress, the brain simply cannot switch into this cleaning mode. The biological machinery of clearance is intimately tied to the psychological state of letting go, making the quality of one's consciousness a critical factor in physical health. During the deepest phases of sleep, the glial cells that support the neurons actually shrink in size, creating larger interstitial spaces that allow fluid to rush through and cleanse the tissue. This physical contraction and expansion is a rhythmic, hydraulic process that mirrors the breath, yet is easily disrupted by fragmented sleep or alcohol consumption. The aging process naturally tends to make sleep more fragile, which in turn reduces the efficiency of this waste removal system. It is here that the intervention must occur, not by forcing sleep, but by creating the conditions in which the body feels safe enough to surrender its defenses. For the person over 60, the challenge is often that the nervous system has accumulated decades of reactive patterns that keep the body in a subtle state of fight or flight, even at night. This hyperarousal prevents the deep, slow-wave sleep necessary for the glymphatic flush to occur, leading to a buildup of toxins that creates brain fog and memory lapses the next day. The approach advocated here involves recognizing that the mind and body are not separate. The anxious thought blocks the physical cleaning channel. Therefore, the preparation for sleep must address the internal noise that acts as a physical barrier to neurological health. The mechanism of action here is dual-pronged, involving both the reduction of cortisol and the promotion of a specific neurotransmitter balance that favors sedation without grogginess. When the body is constantly flooded with stress hormones, the delicate channels of the brain remain constricted and the waste products remain trapped within a neural tissue. Over years, this accumulation begins to suffocate healthy neurons and sever the connections that form the basis of memory. The goal is to lower the biological noise floor so that the subtle, restorative tides of the brain can flow unimpeded. It is entirely normal to feel that the ability to sleep deeply has simply evaporated with age, leaving a sense of frustration and fatigue. However, viewing sleep as a performance that one must get right often creates more tension, further inhibiting the natural process. The shift in perspective requires moving from trying to sleep to simply preparing the ground for rest, trusting the body's ancient knowledge of how to recover. This surrender is the core of the mindful approach, treating the transition to sleep as a sacred practice rather than a mechanical necessity. By understanding the glymphatic system, the individual realizes that every hour of deep sleep is a proactive investment in the longevity of the self. The brain is not passively deteriorating. It is actively attempting to maintain itself against the entropy of life. The nightly ritual becomes a way to cooperate with this biological intent, aligning the conscious with the unconscious need for restoration. When the barriers of stress are removed, the brain demonstrates a remarkable resilience and capacity for clarity, regardless of the calendar year. What thought prevents me from letting go of the day? The chemistry of calm and the cup, the specific vehicle for this nightly transformation, is a tea brewed from lemon balm, Melissa officinalis, often combined with valerian or chamomile, herbs revered for centuries for their ability to soothe the nervous system. While the chemical constituents, such as rosmarinic acid and apigenin, provide direct neuroprotective benefits, the true power lies in the ritual of preparation itself. From the perspective of mindfulness, the act of brewing the tea is not merely a means to consume a beverage, but an exercise in arriving completely in the present moment. The warmth of the cup, the rising steam, and the aroma serve as sensory anchors that signal to the primitive brain that the time for vigilance has ended. Lemon balm, in particular, has been shown to inhibit the enzyme GABA transaminase, which breaks down GABA, the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. By maintaining higher levels of GABA, the herb helps to dampen the excessive electrical activity that manifests as racing thoughts or anxiety. This chemical assistance provides a gentle slope down which the mind can slide into rest, rather than crashing from exhaustion. The synergistic effect of the phytochemicals works to lower the core body temperature slightly and relax the smooth muscles, mimicking the physiological onset of sleep. The midpoint breakthrough in this practice occurs when the individual stops viewing the tea as a sleeping pill and starts viewing it as a stopping practice. The efficacy of the compounds is significantly amplified when consumed in a state of deliberate awareness, known as doing non-doing. If the tea is consumed while scrolling through news feeds or worrying about tomorrow's schedule, the sympathetic nervous system remains active, overriding the subtle influence of the herbs. The integration of the author's philosophy suggests that the tea is the bell that calls the mind back to the body, creating a unified state where the chemistry can take hold. A typical scenario involves the senior practitioner setting aside a specific time, perhaps 45 minutes before bed, to engage in this ritual without distraction. They boil the water, listening to the sound of the kettle, and watch the herbs infuse, observing the change in color with mild curiosity. As they hold the warm ceramic mug, they focus entirely on the sensation of heat transferring to their hands, consciously releasing tension from the shoulders and jaw. This sensory immersion interrupts the default mode network of the brain, the circuit responsible for rumination and worry, effectively clearing the runway for the glymphatic system to take over later. Biological studies suggest that rosmarinic acid also possesses antioxidant properties that directly scavenge free radicals in the brain, offering a secondary layer of protection against aging. This compound acts as a neuroguardian, reducing the oxidative stress that accumulates during the day's metabolic activities. When combined with the stress-reducing effects of the mindful ritual, the tea becomes a potent cocktail for longevity. It addresses both the physical inflammation and the psychological agitation that compromise memory function. The ritual serves as a bridge between the frenetic activity of the day and the stillness required for the night's work of purification. It is a time to practice non-judging, noticing the thoughts that arise without following them into a narrative maze. The warmth of the liquid moving down the throat is a somatic reminder of safety, a signal that triggers the parasympathetic rest and digest response. In this state of safety, the heart rate slows, blood pressure drops, and the body prepares to prioritize repair over reaction. This daily commitment to a moment of stillness is not a luxury, but a maintenance requirement for the high-performance machinery of the human brain. It is an act of self-compassion that acknowledges the wear and tear of existence and offers a deliberate countermeasure. The tea is the tangible element, but the awareness brought to the drinking is the catalyst. Together, they create a nightly reset button that allows the individual to wake up with a slate that has been wiped clean of metabolic and emotional debris. Where in my body am I holding tension right now? Silence as a biological requirement, even with the most potent herbal allies. The practice often fails if the internal environment remains chaotic, a limitation that must be addressed with honesty and precision. The primary obstacle to the brain's nightly wash is the presence of cortisol, the stress hormone that acts as a direct antagonist to the sleep hormones melatonin and adenosine. The modern environment is engineered to keep cortisol levels elevated long after the sun has set, through artificial lighting, digital stimulation, and emotional engagement with remote tragedies. When the mind is engaged in problem-solving or defense, the brain interprets this as a survival situation, prioritizing alertness over the vulnerable state of deep cleaning. A common counterexample is the individual who dutifully drinks their herbal infusion, but does so while engaging in high-intensity cognitive tasks or emotional arguments. In this scenario, the biological signal of the tea is completely drowned out by the screaming alarm of the stress response. The brain will always prioritize immediate survival, which it equates with alertness, over long-term maintenance. Therefore, the tea cannot wash the brain if the gates to the glymphatic system are held shut by the tension of the waking mind. This is where the practice of noble silence or digital twilight becomes a non-negotiable component of the strategy. The limitation of any external substance is that it cannot override the conscious choice to remain engaged with the world. Kabat-Zinn often speaks of the toxicity of the thinking disease, where the mind's relentless commentary obscures the reality of the present moment. At night, this commentary becomes a physical barrier to health. The practice requires a deliberate withdrawal of attention from the external world, a retraction of the senses similar to a turtle pulling into its shell. Without this behavioral boundary, the biological potential of the night is squandered. One might observe that the most difficult aspect of this protocol is not the brewing of the tea, but the confrontation with the silence that follows. For many, silence invites the very thoughts they're trying to avoid, creating a paradox where trying to relax generates more anxiety. The solution lies in shifting the relationship to these intrusive thoughts, viewing them as weather patterns rather than absolute truths. By anchoring attention in the breath or the sensation of the body against the chair, the individual provides a safe harbor for the mind, preventing it from being swept away by the current of worry. The physiological cost of ignoring this requirement is high. Chronic elevation of cortisol leads to the atrophy of the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. This creates a vicious cycle where stress damages the very structure needed to regulate stress in the future. The evening ritual is the intervention point designed to break this cycle. It is a declaration that the day is done and that the problems of tomorrow cannot be solved by the ruminations of tonight. By cultivating a period of non-doing before sleep, the individual signals to the endocrine system that the emergency is over. This allows the intricate clockwork of the circadian rhythm to align, releasing the correct sequence of hormones to initiate sleep. The tea supports this, but the heavy lifting is done by the decision to let go. It is a discipline of subtraction rather than addition, removing the stimuli that prevent the body from doing what it is designed to do. Ultimately, the effectiveness of the night tea depends on the integrity of the container, the mindful space created around the act of consumption. It is a holistic system where chemistry and psychology must work in tandem. If the mind is running a marathon, the body cannot enter the repair shop. Recognizing this limitation is the first step toward overcoming it, moving from a mechanical approach to a relational one, where the individual befriends their own nervous system. What noise do I need to turn off to hear myself? Sustaining the mindful reservoir, the culmination of this nightly practice, is not merely a better night's sleep, but the accumulation of cognitive reserve that serves the individual for the rest of their life. Over weeks and months, the consistent clearing of amyloid beta and tau proteins reduces the background inflammation in the brain, leading to sharper recall and faster processing speeds. The over 60 brain, when treated with this level of respect and care, often reveals a capacity for wisdom and synthesis that younger brains lack. The practice of the night tea transforms the inevitable passage of time into a period of deepening clarity rather than gradual dimming. Integrating this ritual into the fabric of daily life creates a cornerstone of stability in a world that often feels unpredictable. The senior practitioner becomes a custodian of their own consciousness, recognizing that the health of the mind is not a static gift, but a dynamic garden that requires daily watering. The discipline of the evening routine spills over into the daylight hours, fostering a greater sense of presence and less reactivity to daily stressors. The brain that is well-rested and clean is less prone to emotional volatility, creating a positive feedback loop that further lowers cortisol levels. The promise of the future is rewritten through this lens. Instead of fearing the erosion of the self, the individual actively participates in the preservation of their essence. The glymphatic flush becomes a nightly renewal, a biological baptism that restores the neural landscape to its optimal state. This is the ultimate preventive medicine, costing very little in terms of money, but demanding a significant investment in terms of attention and intention. The tea is simple, but the consistency with which it is applied determines the magnitude of the result. By adopting the stance of an observer, as taught in mindfulness traditions, the individual learns to listen to the subtle signals of the body before they become screaming symptoms. If the tea creates a sense of calm one night, but not the next, the practitioner investigates the difference with curiosity rather than judgment. This ongoing dialogue with one's own physiology builds a deep self-knowledge that is the hallmark of healthy aging. It empowers the individual to make micro-adjustments to their lifestyle, ensuring that the trajectory of their health remains upward. The legacy of this practice is a life lived with full engagement, where memory serves as a rich library of experience rather than a crumbling archive. The clarity achieved through the nightly wash allows for the continued learning of new skills, the deepening of relationships, and the enjoyment of the simple pleasures of existence. It challenges the societal stereotype of the declining senior, offering instead the model of the elder who combines the biological resilience of a well-tended body with the psychological depth of a life well lived. In the end, the night tea that washes the brain is a metaphor for a larger truth, that we have more agency over our cognitive destiny than we have been led to believe. Through the convergence of ancient herbal wisdom and modern neuroscience, a path opens up that is accessible to anyone willing to pause and pay attention. The cup is warm, the night is quiet, and the brain is ready to heal itself, provided it is given the permission to do so. What memory do I want to protect the most?